there's not enough multidisciplinary interactions between the different departments and within hospitals and centers. The centers, I mean, university is called the ivory tower for a good reason. It's because it's a very nice little isolated environment. But the thing is, within the ivory tower, because you don't interact with the outside world, it becomes very difficult to really try to find things that are useful for the people. I mean, a lot of the time, you could say that, in a way, research is a bit like being a public servant, where you ask the government for money, which comes from taxes, and in return, you have to justify what it is that you're going to be doing. You have to tell them what it is that your money is going to be used for. I mean, if I ended up asking people for research on cancer, they're going to want to know, well, what are you going to do with this money? And so, this is actually a big problem in academia right now because of, well, drastic cuts in funding, particularly in Canada, where it becomes very difficult for people that actually are outside, like the medical field, to really find ways to justify exactly directly how useful their stuff is going to be. So really having E&D allows you to approach real problems, concrete problems, problems that you yourself can see and actually will care about, and you can actually understand the consequences of from having to interact with patients that have these diseases. But you'll have the tools from your PhD. You'll be able to understand how you can go start approaching those questions, start breaking things down. A common misconception is that in PhD is not about making MDs with PhDs. It's about making a hybrid. It's about doing something about giving people a training that will be different from having both separately. If you are an MD PhD and you're approaching medicine and research exactly as you would either separately as an MD and a PhD, it's a complete waste of time because you're supposed to be able to bring in your experience as a PhD to your clinic, and you're supposed to be able to bring your clinic to your PhD. Because when it comes down to it, the concerns that the MDs have and the PhDs have, and I can't emphasize this enough, they're not the same. There are a lot of conflicts between people that do research and people that do medicine. People that do medicine will often criticize researchers for not doing anything useful, whereas PhDs will criticize people in medicine because they don't think enough about the problems that they're dealing with. And this is actually a quote from various scientists that I made. And by having the literacy in both domains, it really allows you to be able to reconcile the differences between both camps and be able to bridge both camps, which can actually find useful solutions for other people. So a point I really want to emphasize to this group, but before I make this point, I want to know, how many people here are in, say, biological sciences? As a general category. So most people. How many people here are more from, say, social sciences, humanities? So most people would think that the MD PhD program is really more directed towards people like me that do work like molecular biology, cancer, immunology, whatever. But really there's no such department for doing your PhD. You can find a way to justify doing your PhD and you're pretty much done. Within the MD PhD program, we have people do their PhDs in experimental medicine. I mean, we have people in biochemistry, immunology, anthropology, genetics, engineering, epidemiology. You name it, we probably have had at least one person doing it. Though, of course, there's more of a focus on people that do like experimental medicine and more cancer and molecular biology oriented things. Simply because most people that get into med school come from, say, the biological sciences on that end. But that isn't to say that this program might not be for you. The vast majority of you will be familiar with what is commonly referred to as quantitative research. Quantitative research has to do with a discrete unit that you can measure and detect and evaluate. But something I really want to emphasize, and that's something that's been brought to my attention a bit more recently, is the importance of qualitative research. Qualitative research may seem a whole lot floppier than quantitative research. It often doesn't get quite the respect that it does because, for a variety of reasons, especially from our end, because it doesn't seem to be quite as rigorous or quite as relevant. But in actuality, from my perspective, as future MDs, you actually might have, it actually probably is more pertinent to have more people do PhDs in qualitative research because, to quote what they like to tell you a lot in the first year of med school, your patient is a person. And as condescendingly and frequently as you will be told this, it's actually very pertinent because a lot of your decisions, even though it's like you're gonna have someone come to you with, say, a set of problems. I mean, if someone comes to see you, it's not just what are they coming to see you with, it's why are they coming to see you now with. There's a social dimension to how it is that they interact with their disease and how they will, and the justification for why they'll come and see you. And this social dimension is really where the qualitative research and actually becomes useful. And the sheer number of patients and people that MDs interact with really makes this sort of, a rich avenue for future research. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but there are people within medicine that are doing very relevant things. For example, Donald Woodrow, who was the Associate Dean of Medicine, actually did a study to try to understand why it was that patients were dissatisfied with their doctors. Because you often hear, like, there's all kinds of problems in the healthcare system, especially right now, if you read the newspapers, there's a lot of, the liberal government's getting a lot of flack for it. But really, for example, the reason, what we found was the top thing that pissed people off was that they did not feel that their doctors listened to them. They felt that they were being treated as cattle and being shuffled around. And so this was the result of a qualitative study. And as a result, McGill ended up drastically changing the way that medicine is actually taught to students and the way that people actually end up being interviewed. So in reality, when you think that quantitative research is substantial and rigorous and everything, it is very important and it's very relevant and it's easier to approach for us in, say, the biological sciences. I mean, if you're someone that does not find like quantitative research to be particularly interesting and you like more of the patient and contact and patient interaction, you might be interested in qualitative research where you can actually address concepts like quality of life, things that cannot be measured but are very pertinent and actually more easy to address from like a policy perspective. Really, the thing with the PhD program for me is like, it's not, the system isn't there to tell you how to do it. You're there to tell the system how to do it. You're there to show people how it's done. So what is the program? The exact organization actually varies with different universities. I mean, if you go to the University of Calgary, they'll have a bit more flexibility, for example. McGill follows more the classical format, which is the way that things tend to be done in the US, which is you do, well, in McGill you do basic medicine, so you do all your coursework. Then when you're done with your coursework, they stick you in your PhD, and then you have about 3 to 4 years to do it. And then after you're done with your PhD, they throw you into clinics. And when you're done with the clinics, you'll have been done with for about 7 to 8 years. 7 to 8 years. I'm going to be 30 when I graduate, and then I need to do a residency, and then I need to do a fellowship, which is going to count as a postdoc. I'm going to be old. I'm going to be practically 4 years old. I'm going to tell my mom, hey, I finally got my first real job. Yeah. But I mean, when you think about it in those terms, yeah, it seems a bit daunting, but the reality of it, I mean, past your first 2 years of med school, you're really not in school anymore. Your PhD, your research is your own work. You are going to be directing how things are done. When you go back to the clinic, you're still being told kind of what to do, but I mean, it's more of a learning how to do your jobs still kind of sense. So it's a lot more pertinent than just being sitting in the classroom and being taught that continuously, incoherently. And same thing for residency. Same thing for fellowship efforts. So you can kind of see it as like being in school for a very long time, but really the training really never ends. It's like once you're past like the first initial steps where you actually learn how to do a few other things, I mean, you're pretty much doing your own work, which is valorizing in a way. There are a lot of different ways that people can go about doing PhDs and MDs, different orientations and different orders. Some people prefer to do like PhD before, some people prefer to do PhDs after medicine, some people prefer doing PhDs during medicine or during residency. And there are different programs for all of these different kinds of situations. And there are pros and cons to each. So from my perspective, the advantages to the MD PhD program, which is doing your PhD during medicine, is that you have protected research time. I cannot emphasize this enough. To give an example with CIP, CIP is a clinician investigator program, which is for residents, so MD PhD for residents. You do not have protected research time. You're going to have done like a couple years of residency, and then, well, you're constantly going to be under pressure from your former supervisors or colleagues to continuously come back to the clinic, because there's a shortage of physicians everywhere, and they're constantly being overwhelmed. And they will need you constantly to come and see them and help them. And it's really important to keep a foot in the clinic, but when you're doing the research, you really cannot afford that kind of time lapse, especially if you're doing this in a very short time frame. Most PhDs actually are done in like 5-6 years if you're good. You're trying to do here a PhD in about 3 to 4 years. You're working hard, and you're probably not seeing too many weekends. And so if you have someone that's constantly harassing you to come like spend time in the clinic, that is time that you're spending away from your experiments. Another thing that's really important is funding. Officially, we can't fund everybody, but there has not been a year where we have not been able to fund everybody. As an MD PhD up to now, every single person has been able to get a CIHR grant or an equivalent as soon as they start research. So it pays for their salary, it pays for their tuition,